Hi, I'm Nadia. I'm an engineer. And so usually when I say that, I get one of two responses. Oh, wow, that's so cool. Or the other one, which is, I guess, a little bit less friendly, and it says, but you're a girl. And you're so tiny. Um, so I think the appropriate response is thank you. Still not quite sure. And I understand, there's not that many women engineers in the world. Women engineers make up, in developed countries, about 20% of the engineering workforce. In Africa, much less than that. In Kenya, where we started working recently, 3% of all engineers are women. But to be honest, the world lacks engineers. And I can only think that it's because we've just had really bad PR. I mean, doctors have Grey's Anatomy. Lawyers, they've got Boston Legal. Who do we have? We have Wallowitz from The Big Bang Theory and that guy from Prison Break. So, bad PR. So why is engineering so important to me, and what do I do as an engineer? It's not all hard hats and overalls. I don't know who started spreading that hard hat and overall thing, but it wasn't me. We need to try and change those stereotypes. But as a young engineer, I get to travel, and I love this continent. That Africa is not a country, but it's made up of 54 amazing different states and different people and different cultures. And what I realized that everybody calls it the land of opportunity, right? And it is. Last year, the Chinese invested $200 billion in Africa, of which 80% was in natural resources. And you can see this really clearly when you land in Harai International Airport and the signage is in Mandarin and English. Or you go to the African Union building in Addis in Ethiopia, which was designed, engineered, constructed by the Chinese. It's great, right? This is good news for Africa. But traveling on the ground, there's something really different that's happening. So in Africa, we've got some stark realities. We've got millions of people below the poverty line. We have some of the highest unemployment rates in the world, especially among our young people, sometimes up to 60 to 70% of our youth are unemployed. In South Africa, 50% of our young people are unemployed. In sub-Saharan Africa, 70% of all the youth that are employed are actually women. So when we start to talk about Africa and the land of opportunity, I realized something. I realized that we think about mineral resources, we think about the gold, the platinum, the diamonds, all the shiny stuff that we dig out, the oil, the natural gas. We think about it as an agricultural opportunity, the breadbasket for the rest of the world, because we've got great sunshine here. We've got amazing arable land, and we've got some untapped water resources. And everybody's kind of clamoring and buying up agricultural land in Africa. But we fail to recognize the one most important resource, and that is the African person, and especially the African girl child. By 2024, the International Labour Organization says that we're going to have 1 billion people entering the labor market here in Africa. 1 billion people, that's greater than China, that's greater than India. So for me, what's going on in my head right now is that, look, so we've got all these mineral resources, right? With a bread basket, with a mineral basket, we've got, name a mineral, we've got it. We've got the people, right? So let's stop digging the stuff up, sending it abroad, getting it processed there, and then we buy it back at 2, 3, 4 times the price of what we sold it. Because we're always going to be in trade deficit then, right? Let's start manufacturing in Africa. Because there's a number of things. Firstly, we're going to essentially escalate our economies. We're going to reduce unemployment. And thirdly, carbon footprints, right? Because it costs so much money and so much of our environment to be able to ship things from different ends of the world to get processed and then just ship them back. It just doesn't make sense to me. So what do we need to make this happen? And why focus on the girl child? Is that we need engineering, right? All different types of engineering, not just the hard hat, the boots, the overalls, down in mines. No, not that kind of engineering. We need the smart engineering, the ones that do the heavy lifting with their minds to be able to design better futures in Africa. And why focus on women, right? Because we need different kinds of engineers. But right now, the engineering society is very skewed. And the very fundamental reason on why I've become an engineering evangelist, specifically focused on women, as you may call it, is because for 2 different reasons, the social imperative and the economic imperative. So the social imperative, I mean, we've heard it all before, gender equality, blah, 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 blah. I'm tired of talking about it. Because I'm going to sound like a stuck record. So there's that, that, we make up 50% of the population. we a marginalized minority at 50% of the population globally. There's also the imperative, the social imperative that says for every $1 that a woman earns, 80% goes back into her family. For every $1 that a man earns, 30% of it goes back into his family. So imagine if we had more women actively involved and engaged and earning equally in the economy. What does that do for families? What does that do for communities? And how does that uplift the whole of society? So there's that social imperative, right? The second one is more important. And this is about speaking the business language of the world. And I was fortunate to speak to a group of CEOs and company directors. And these days everybody has a director of innovation, so that every company can be innovative. I don't know what they do. That's probably the biggest con yet. But so we've got a room full of CEOs, directors of innovation, directors of marketing. And of course, because of the gender parity issues at senior levels of management, which is a different TED talk entirely, it was 99% male. And I asked a simple question, and I said, how many of you in the room have said, I don't understand women? And so some guys put up their hand. Other guys put up 2 hands. Some gentlemen actually just got up to say that they really didn't understand women. And I looked around and I said, gentlemen, and the scattered ladies in the room, look around. We have a fundamental business problem right here. Because what you're telling me now is that you are the leadership of some of the biggest industries in the world. And you fundamentally don't understand 50% of the population that controls 80% of the purchasing power. Business problem. So all that's going to happen is that we're going to get one astute female entrepreneur who's going to start designing better systems, and you're going to lose your competitive advantage. Different gender conversation entirely. And I always give examples. This is why we need more women as engineers and designers of our world. Very bad example. So I'm a shopaholic. I admit it right now on stage in front of everybody. Hi, I'm Nadia, shopaholic. And I spend a lot of time in malls. And when you become a career woman, what they don't tell you is that it comes with a cape because you become a superwoman. So you're always in a rush, right? You've got your family, you've got your career, you've got everything, and you're rushing around in heels, in a mall with glossy tiles. So I'm essentially an accident waiting to happen. If I was in America, I'd be a lawsuit waiting to happen. And I'm like, why would they put glossy tiles in a mall with those lovely mesh things on the floor where my heels get stuck into? And I think, who thought of this? Obviously somebody who's never worn heels. And so when we get women who are designing things, right, we get better solutions. So what we realized is that women are adapting to the world instead of thriving in the world. And so this is why I've been on this great path over the last 9 years to actually drum up support and get more girls into engineering, to change the PR around engineering, to move away from hard hats and boots and overalls, to show that engineering actually has such a powerful place in the way we design systems, how we design our world so that everybody can thrive. Because let me tell you, I'm going to be honest with you right now. If I walked into a world where there were just women engineers, I would start Man-Eng to get more men into engineering. Because it's about being able to have that parity, to be able to have 2 groups of people coming in from diverse backgrounds, diverse way of thinking, to create the best solutions, to actually really talk to some of the problems that are facing society and facing our world today. And what we did was we were bold, we were brazen. We decided we were going to revolutionize the face of engineering before revolutions were actually popular, which they are today. So we were going to start a revolution, and we did it quite quietly at first. And we thought, well, what we do need to do is start to create interventions all along the engineering skill pipeline. So we needed to start attracting more girls into engineering, showcasing that it's not just the Wallowitzes of the world that are engineers, the geeky guys behind computers or the guys on the working side, but actually engineers could be anybody. Each one of us are an engineer and a designer, and actually getting these kids to study at a university or in a university of technology. But also, for every one engineer that studies at a university, we need 10 technologists who've studied at a university of technology. And for every one technologist, you need 10 artisans, right? So it's a pyramid scheme, essentially, that works. It's not one of those shady ones. And so it was, how do we create a sexy engineering industry, and showcasing that engineers can do anything. Because look around you, everything that we have today has been designed by an engineer. We kind of like superheroes. And we wanted to show that to young girls across South Africa. The second thing is that it's not just enough to be able to graduate with a degree any longer, right? What we realize is that people need critical thinking abilities. Every company out there is looking for the business ready graduate, whatever that means. And so we decided to actually incubate these female engineering students that were about to enter industry. But beyond that, it was how do we actually start to get these engineers to start thinking like entrepreneurs? And so entrepreneurship has become a very sexy word. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Yeah, I'm an entrepreneur as well. But what does that mean, right? Just because you studied entrepreneurship doesn't make you an entrepreneur, right? So how do we actually get them to start thinking not just about starting a small business, but how do we start taking a small business, taking an idea and escalate it into a mega industry? How do we start getting Africans to become business people so that we can start trading with each other? How do we start growing our economies? Because it's going to happen by SMMEs, but actually what we need is mega global enterprises that are made in Africa and exported to the rest of the world. So we started to get these girls to start thinking about themselves in a mega way, not just kind of the small, I'm an engineer, I'm going to sit behind the computer and I'm going to be a cog in our economy. No, I'm going to be the engineer that drives our economy. And then, of course, we wanted to create a platform that engineers from everywhere could come, men and women, and we could start discussing really important things. Beyond that, we created the Ad Network platform. And we've been so successful in South Africa. I'm so proud to say that this year, our first group of girl engineers are about to graduate as female engineers. It's amazing. And so we're trying to create the skills that are actually going to be driving our economies forward. Because my vision for Africa, not just for my country, but for my continent that I'm so passionate about, is to be able to be the continent that gives aid to the rest of the world and not just the recipient of aid from the rest of the world. And so I invite every one of you to join the revolution.